Hear me? And welcome to the presentation on assessment and reporting. We've got one person in the room, which is great, but quite a few online, which is fantastic. Just to let people know, we will be recording this session so that it's available for others as well, because I know many people wanted to join, but were maybe traveling or working. So we'll be happily make the recording available as we give a little update on assessment and reporting at StGIS. And sorry, just having some problems with my computer. There's an overview of the session and what we hope to cover today. And of course, at the end, we will also happily take questions. Equally, if you have questions that you want to put into the Q&A during the presentation, then we will try and either answer them during the presentation, Mr. Patton's here moderating that, or pick up on those at the end as well. So why are we here? Well, we're here because, from September, there was a sort of revised and updated approach to assessment and reporting at StGIS, something we've been working on the year before. And, frankly, we didn't get the communication with that right. We didn't communicate it particularly well to parents, or probably many would say poorly to parents. And we acknowledge that, and hopefully putting that right this evening with this session. As always, when we think about anything at school, we think about our mission, our vision, our values, why we're here. And so when we think about assessment and reporting, we think about things like inspiring our students, discovering their strengths, that whole idea of a lifelong love of learning, and each child having talent, or a young person having talent that we want to nurture and grow. Those are some of the things that help inform our approach to assessment and reporting. Fundamentally, why do we assess and report? Well, the kind of primary purpose is to support, not distort learning, which of course, is not easy to do, but that fundamentally is what we're trying to achieve via our approach to assessment and reporting. But of course, we recognize it's not that simple, and there are multiple purposes, multiple audiences, and that makes it very complicated, makes it very challenging. We are trying to support, not distort learning, but at the same time, provide information to parents, inform decisions about grade level movements, and, in the high stakes end of things, entry to university and employment and that kind of thing. So multiple purposes, multiple audiences makes assessment and reporting a very, very difficult thing to get kind of right and meet everybody's needs and all of its purposes. So having some kind of guiding principles then is important. And those are the assessment principles that are at the heart of our assessment and reporting policy. I'm not going to read through them for you, but some of the kind of key elements, that sense of it being continuous, and I'll talk a little bit about that sense of making sure that it's a holistic process that doesn't just look at classroom learning, but looks at the whole child, the whole young person, and how they're growing in all elements of school. That central aspect of self-reflection. And again, I'll lean into that during this presentation. So these are the principles that help guide our decisions about assessment and reporting at StGIS. At the heart, then, of our approach to assessment and reporting is continuous online reporting, or CORE. CORE is core. And why is that the case? Well, because we believe, and the research that we've done and the examples that we've looked at, that timely, targeted feedback as part of our responsive teaching in the classroom, supported via communication, via manage back and that kind of thing, is what will support, not distort learning. And so we're putting a lot of our energies into continuous online reporting and trying to make that the very best it can be, that live access to information about learning, about progress, Students can see their grades, key feedback, parents can access information about their son or daughter's learning, and then other stakeholders can access information as needed as well. ManageBack and Aura are key to that, and a lot of it comes through ManageBack. And these are some slides that I shared with parents at the last reporting cycle, and I'm going to very quickly run through them as a reminder, but of course, we'll send the presentation out as well, because as a parent, being able to manage ManageBack, is obviously important, isn't it? And so, things like switching between different children, setting up the dashboard so that you can see the kind of things you want by organizing it and focusing on things like, hey, I want to see tasks and deadlines or classes. You can kind of turn those things on and off. You can access reports and the archive historically as well from previous years and download those as PDFs as and when you need them. And then in terms of the real detail, you can look at tasks, you can look at comments, you can look at scores, grades, feedback, and all of this key information for a subject, or getting a quick overview of what's going on at the moment, or leaning in particularly to a subject. So, for example, INS, scrolling down, whoa, look at all of that, bar charts, grades, tasks, it's all there. It's all there, but we get it. We get that it also is not necessarily easy to navigate, which is why we kind of send those presentations out, but also why we've been doing some work in the background. And we hope, and I'll talk about that in a minute, that in the next reporting cycle, that kind of accessing that information, which is what we got a lot of feedback about, will be easier for parents. And I'll come back to that. So that's continuous online reporting, really important to our intent to support, not distort learning. Equally, student reflection is super, super important. That whole sense of thinking about learning, metacognition, if you want to use the kind of fancy term for it. And of course, particularly when it's focused on a student's strengths, it helps to develop their love of learning, allows them to curate their own learning journey, identify their strengths as well as areas for development. And, this sort of focus on self-reflection is about agency, students owning that journey, owning their learning, owning their progress, and that all feeds into kind of motivation. And it's for that reason that our reporting cycle has student reflection at its heart and really is focused on supporting them, facilitating them, putting our energies into helping them to reflect on their learning. As a quick kind of reminder, for report one, we've had that, we got that back in October, that sense of understanding what has gone well, what could be even better, some goal setting, that kind of thing. That was the focus of report one. In report two, again, self-reflection, but this time guided by approaches to learning, research skills, communication skills, thinking skills, self-management skills, that kind of thing, as well as looking back at goals, reflecting against those, updating as necessary. And again, in report two, there was also, or not again, actually, in report two, there was also a working at grade for grades 11 and 12. Report three, this is kind of what's coming next, so to speak, and just before the spring break. That will be very similar to report two. However, and as I said, we've done some work in the background, there will also be a greater kind of transcript of tasks and grades summarized in the report for parents to see a lot more easily the kind of progress that their students or their children are making. And I'll show you some examples in a minute. And then finally, at the end of the year, that kind of more of a summative end of year report. Again, there will be student self-reflection, maybe guided by things like the IB learner profile, global citizenship. But of course, grades, particularly those end of year summative grades, will be an important part of that final report, with grade 11 getting their 1 to 7 end of year grades. And also then the MYP getting their 1 to 7 summative grades informed by the MYP criteria. And Mr. Larondi will talk against that shortly. One area that we definitely got some feedback on was what's happened to the approaches to learning grades, which is a great question. And you know, the answer is we said goodbye to them. And there was good reasons for that. It wasn't just a kind of like, you know, snap decision. Ultimately, you know, we felt an experience in our school, as well as informed by, you know, wider research and conversations outside of our school community, that idea of grading self-management or communication or collaboration, those really important ATL skills, they are still important, but grading them was arbitrary, it was artificial, it took away from the conversation, which it should be a conversation about, hey, how can I improve my self-management, or what do I need to do to collaborate more effectively across my classes as a learner? So that was why we moved away from those grading, or the grading of approaches to learning. So as I've sort of indicated, we recognize that, you know, managed back can be an absolute jungle of and you know, accessing the information for parents in particular who are busy and who are not always on it, like the students, can be difficult. And so what we've tried to do is work in the background for the next reporting cycle, and in fact then it will be in reports 2, 3 and 4 going forward, is to include a kind of more detailed transcript of feedback and grades in the report for parents and students. And here's an MYP example here. I know that's quite small, but it's just a screenshot. And it obviously would be for every subject. So for individuals and societies, you can see the tasks, the main tasks that have been covered, and feedback, like was it completed, what was the score for a test, for example, or what were the MYP criteria scores. And so you can see there A and C for one of those tasks was grade 4 and grade 6, or 4 out of 8 and 7 out of 8, that kind of thing. So by providing this, we hope that parents will be able to more easily access that kind of quick summary overview of the progress that their children are making. And the same for DP. And again, it's quite small, but you can see biology here, and you can see there, you can see test scores, 1 to 7 grades, and that kind of thing in biology. So that is something that we hope will go some way to kind of providing the information that parents said was missing, and the feedback we received. So on the subject of grades and learning, you know, again, it's a big conversation. And the relationship between grades and learning, and whether one supports or distorts learning, et cetera, is a huge conversation. Not even big, it's huge. And fundamentally, when we ask ourselves the question how and when to grade, there's no easy answers. There's no easy answers for a number of reasons, but in essence, you know, learning's complicated, rich, multifaceted, non-linear. You know, it's a journey, and it's a beautiful journey, but it's not a journey that is easily graded. But grading is important. It's important because it provides a shared meaning, you know, that means parents can understand, or somebody from outside of the school can understand where a student sits, what progress they've made, what they're strong at, what they're not strong at. So it is necessary, but grading is also a bit crude, judgmental, reductionist. And there's therefore a tension between learning and grading. And our approach to assessment and reporting is focused on trying to navigate that tension. And as we do that, focusing on formative assessment that is shared and owned by the students and the teachers, that's the essence of continuous online reporting and responsive teaching in the classroom. Here's feedback, here's how you can improve, this is how you can develop that aspect of that essay, or improve that piece of design work or that science experiment. That is what should be maximized and what we're aiming to maximize in the classroom. And then the higher stakes kind of summative grading aspect needs to be a lot more infrequent and a lot more carefully done to ensure that that is valid and reliable. But of course, it is necessary. I'm now going to hand over to Mr. Luondi, who will talk then about particularly that last bit, that summative stuff, the big stuff, the high stakes stuff, the stuff that we know parents often engage with, and how that happens in the MYP. And then he'll hand over to Mr. Patton, who will take us through how that works in the DP. So over to Mr. Luondi.
Standing in the wings.
Standing in.
Hello, yes. Hello, everyone. Good evening. Yeah, I'm going to talk a little bit about MYP grading, and particularly the summative side of MYP grading. Obviously, formative assessments take place during the year, and throughout the year also we get the summative assessments, which generally take place at the end of a unit, but not necessarily at the end of the unit. These summative assessments are marked against criteria that are provided by the IB themselves. We can interpret those criteria, but we use IB provided criteria. And those criteria are grade specific so that you know that there's a progression of learning taking place. And in particular, something which is not changed at all is the fact that at the end of the year, all students in the MYP will receive their summative grades for that year. And so what I'm going to try and do today is explain how that happens. And it's not an easy process. It's not an easy one to understand. The MYP have made this quite complicated, but hopefully I can clarify some of the aspects about how a student receives their subject grades at the end of the year. So let me use mathematics as an example, because it's one I'm much more familiar with. In mathematics, we have 4 criteria which are given to us by the IB, which we mark against: knowledge and understanding, investigating patterns, communicating, and using and applying real-life mathematics. Now, the one that most of us as parents would be most familiar with is the idea of knowledge and understanding, which is a sort of a test and exam style paper where you are working through questions. The other ones are perhaps a little bit less familiar, but we still assess them. So here, for example, is, you don't need to be able to do these questions. This is the front page of a communication assessment for grade 10 from mathematics. And on that front page, you can see perhaps at the top where it's been shaded in, this is a communicating assessment. And the rubric for that, the where the marks are going to be provided, is given on that front page. So the students are aware of where their marks are going to be, where their levels are going to be awarded. And then the questions begin, and they would fill in the gaps in this. It's about a 5-page test on probability, where you can see the boxes. They are being assessed about their ability to communicate their understanding in probability. So there's a task. The student gets the task, they sit the task, and we mark the task. What we're going to do for that is we're going to award an achievement level. Now, that achievement level will be awarded from 0 to 8. There are 4 bands in there: band 1 to 2, 3 to 4, 5 to 6, and 7 to 8. And we award based on whether a student is reaching that particular level. So the student sits this communicating assessment, and we judge their performance against these. Let's say we know that they're falling within this band here, and they're getting, let's say, a level 5 in this assessment. At the end of the year, we would have hoped, we would expect, we require, in fact, that all students will have sat at least 2 assessments from each of those objectives. So in this particular class, this grade 10 class, they are going to have done 3 communication pieces, 3 communication assessments. So in the task that we just showed you, let's say the student got a 5. In the first communication task, they did really well, they got an 8, and in the third one, they get a 6. Now, the teacher's job now is to make a holistic judgment based on those three levels, a holistic judgment about what their level for this is. So some level out of 8. Now, you could look at those. What we don't do is we don't average them. We don't add them up and divide by 3. What we will do is we will look at those and look at perhaps the progression of learning. We'll look at the individual tasks and determine which ones may have been more accessible than others. We'll even look at the individual student and try and understand why their performance may have been less good in one assessment than in another. And at the end of the day, we give an assessment. So for this one, for example, you might think maybe the student would get a level 6 or maybe a level 7. The teacher has awarded a level 7. That level 7 for communication is now their communication grade for the year, their level for the year. That forms part of one of 4 levels. So in criteria A, they've got a 6, in B 5, that level 7 in C, and the level 4 in D. We add those marks up, and if my maths is correct, they've got a total of 22. So the maximum you could get is 8. So they've got a maximum, they've got a level 22 out of 32. Now that is then where we obtain our 1 to 7 grade. Our 1 to 7 grade comes from, again, something which is provided by the IB. The IB has said if a student is getting 28 to 32, they're getting a level 7. This student, if you remember, got 22, so they would be awarded a level 5 for mathematics. Now that is taking place in every single subject because every single subject has 4 criteria of which they are marked against. At the end of the year, you will get a report with those levels on. Now, why can't we provide those levels earlier? Well, because we don't have the full information. And it's only fair and reasonable that we provide that 1 to 7 grade at the end of the school year when people have had a chance to improve, to make progress based on the information they're provided by the teacher, and to see that progression. So that 1 to 7 grade comes at the end. A student might have a disaster on one assessment, but because they're being given multiple opportunities to show their attainment, then that is then that is then being demonstrated throughout. So that will appear in the report, just like it has before in report 4 at the end of the school year. Hopefully that's cleared things up and not made it even muddier. But now to talk about the diploma program grading system, I'm going to hand over to Mr. Patton.
Thank you, Mr. Laurandi. Hello, everybody. Thanks so much for joining. And I want to talk a little bit about the diploma program and how it's a bit different to the MYP. First and foremost, the diploma program curriculum coverage and the learning, it's faster paced, it's more condensed in that entirety of the diploma program. And so as a result, we believe it's fair, it's reasonable, and very much important to begin that grading a bit earlier in the year. By the time we get to December of grade 11 or DP year 1, we are close to 25% of the way through the entire diploma program. So it's important for students to get an idea of how they're performing in that course, so that way they can make adjustments throughout DP year 1 and as they get into DP year 2. As a result, you can expect that DP students are going to receive working at grades from that report 2 in DP year 1, so that Christmas report. Now, I realize I've just brought up this term, working at grades, and when you're looking at reports, you're actually going to see 4 separate terms that we give to the grades that are associated here. Now, that might seem a little bit outlandish, but I promise there's a reason for it. So first off, you've got the summative grade, and this is effectively all of the information that we've taken for that individual, and we give the best fit judgment of how they're doing in that course based off of IB grade descriptors. And typically this comes at the end of the year or the end of an entire reporting cycle. What I just mentioned, the working at grade, that one's more commonly going to be used, especially throughout the DP program. The goal here is to show students currently here is where you are working at compared to the IB grade descriptors. Now, that also takes into account the content coverage that has happened at that point in time. So for example, if we're looking at a language acquisition subject like ab initio or language B, HL, or SL, the grade descriptors from the IB about those particular subjects suggest that students have to have a command over a language which they may not totally have yet. So this is why a working at grade might look a little bit lower than it does down the road. Then we get into the idea of predicted grades. Now, predicted grades kind of take two pathways with them. The first one is the one that influences university recognition, university applications, and this sort of thing. What we do in the diploma program is we determine predicted grades by September of DP year 2. So in other words, grade 12. That means that we look at all the data we've accumulated throughout grade 11, including reported grades, including the midterms, and including the end of year exams for grade 11 students. And we try to build essentially a scatter plot so that we can get an idea of where they might be down the road. Now, trying to make a prediction for how somebody's going to perform in a year is actually really very challenging. But we've been doing lots of different work on this, and our systems are pretty good where we're able to predict with pretty reasonable accuracy the predicted grades for university applications. And again, that's in September when they first come in. But the university predicted grades are also dynamic. In other words, they shift based off of when the student is applying. So if I have a student who's applying to, let's say, UK veterinary medicine courses, they need to apply in October, and they'll apply with the predicted grades they have at that time. But if I have another student who's applying to, let's say, a business degree in the UK in January, their predicted grades are going to be more informed by all the data we've collected from September, October, November, and December. So the predicted grade may change as we get closer to their application. In other words, when a student goes to apply to university, we take the most up-to-date and accurate predicted grade that we can get for that student. It's not like their predicted grades in September are what they're going to be applying for in March. We'll take as much data as we can so that we're more accurate. Additionally, the IB requires predicted grades that we submit to them in April of DP year 2. So in grade 12, we as teachers are then responsible for submitting predicted grades to the IB. In most cases, that's just a quality control for us as teachers and our communication with the IB, just to make sure that we are in line, our grading practices are appropriate, and we are doing the right things with that. In non-common situations, like in the COVID year where students couldn't do the exams, those predicted grades that we sent to the IB became super important. And I'm really proud that here at the school, our IB predicted grades are pretty accurate. So much so that when 2020 came around and our students couldn't take the exams, the IB felt confident because our last 4 to 5 years of predictions were on, and they were able to award those grades based off our predictions. Predicted grades are complicated. They're a bit messy. If I'm honest, I don't like them, but it is something that we work with for different universities for their applications. Finally, you might see an exam grade, and that's specific to a formal examination period that students will have taken. So if you are a parent of a DP student, you know that right now grade 11 students are doing their midterms, and that last week grade 12 students were doing their mock exams. Those are going to give you an exact grade in terms of how students are doing on that formal assessment. And that shows how the student's doing there. Now, it's possible that an exam grade might not be the same thing as a working at grade or a summative grade because the exam grade doesn't feed everything into the overall view of how a student's doing. Ultimately, all this comes down to grade descriptors. And grade descriptors are provided by the IB, and they inform all the judgments that we're making with regard to that 1 to 7 grade for students. It doesn't just come down to how well they do in paper 1 or paper 2 of their maths test, for example. It comes down to a bunch of different factors that play into how well they understand the content. And there's lots of ways that we as teachers at the school inform our judgments about those grades so that we can interpret the grade descriptors for each student. In-class discussions, quizzes, tests, written work, independent work, collaborative work, summative assessments, all these things help to inform the DP grade descriptors. And those grade descriptors are subject specific. So for example, in group 1, the studies in language and literature, the grade descriptor is very clear in terms of what students should be able to do. They need to demonstrate excellent understanding and appreciation of the interplay between form and content, for example. And for example, when we get to language B, it's a slightly different grade descriptor for how students do in this one. The same thing is going to be true for group 3, for group 4, for the sciences, for group 5, maths, for the grade 6, or for group 6, the arts, and of course for extended essay and TOK as well. In other words, each subject has a very specific way in which we understand how a student is performing at a level 7, level 6, level 5, level 4, and it doesn't just come down to their exam grade. It's lots of things that are informing that. Now, those DP grade descriptors, and I'm mainly talking about the DP, but just so that we're all aware, there's also MYP grade descriptors, which of course we use quite a bit. I always joke with Mr. Laurandi that MYP saw the DP doing something really cool and they said, oh, we need to do this as well. Yeah. Now, that's DP and that's MYP. To talk a little bit more about primary, I'm going to hand it back over to Mr. Will.
Excellent. But before I do, kind of just do a quick update on primary. One thing that we didn't mention about MYP, in particular for grade 10, as we look to enhance, in particular, our grade 10 course and smooth that transition from grade 10 to grade 11. Grade 10 students will have exams sort of end of April time this year. So kind of formal exams, which sort of model the IB diploma exams as well. So giving them more access to that kind of experience as part of their assessment and reporting journey. And Mr. Laurandi will be sending a message out to grade 10 parents in due course about that. In primary, of course, our youngest students, our grade 4, 5s, that focus on growth, not grades, nurturing that love of learning really, really is even more important than anywhere else within the school, isn't it? And at the same time, we recognize that, particularly when it comes to the end of year report, that need for a shared meaning and easily digestible grade, for want of a better phrase, is there, isn't it? And we are exploring and researching the best way to do that. And Miss Wiley will be in touch, or myself and Miss Wiley will be in touch with the grade 4 or 5 parents in particular to update them. As we get to the end, don't worry. I know it's been a little longer than I thought, but as we get to the end and think about special reports, this has come up a couple of times in conversations and questions. What if I need X, Y, or Z for summer school application? Or, you know, I'm thinking of maybe going to a different school, or I need to, you know, I don't know, apply for a summer job or something. I don't know, whatever it might be needed. We can make those or create those special reports or transcripts on request to meet specific requirements. So if parents do have the need for a mid-year report with more kind of formal grades than the ones that we're providing currently with our system, then please do send through the request and we will make sure that happens. In summary, assessment and reporting that supports, not distorts learning, is kind of finding the balance between growth and grades, isn't it? And they are, I believe the term is a unity of opposites. You know, that one does not exist without the other, but they're often in tension, aren't they? And they're often pulling in different directions. And so our challenge is to find a way of supporting growth, but also measuring growth and getting that balance between those two, which is what we've tried to do with our approach to assessment and reporting. But we're not going to say it's easy, because it isn't. That's a summary. And we will, I think there has been some questions in the chat, and hopefully we can kind of address some of those now. Let me have a look.
Hit one of those, if that's okay.
Yes.
Great.
Mr. Patton's got an answer to a question about, I think, predicted grades, right?
Yeah, so there's a great question here from Shireen Punt. Thanks so much for putting this in here. The question is, I heard that predicted and working at grades at the end of the year 11 are the same. Is that correct? Also, just mentioned, is that the same for September for the predicted grades? So in most cases, the working at grade and the summative grade for year 11 will be the same. In most cases, you'll see those similar. Very rare situations will the working at grade not be the same as the summative grade, and that's because we want to identify the growth that has happened by that time. However, the summative grade at the end of grade 11 is not always the same as the September predicted grade. There are many ways that students can, one, demonstrate that they're already growing and they're kind of going in a direction. And so often we'll have teachers, and they'll talk with me as well, and we look at that sort of prediction, and we try to make the best prediction based off of the work that they've done throughout grade 11 and what we anticipate they're going to do in grade 12. On top of that, in some situations, we can have students return for grade 12, and they might opt to try to do another sort of assessment or another way to show that they can earn a higher grade area. And in negotiations with teachers, then that can work out well, where, for example, a teacher might say, right, I believe you. I think, you have the capability to be hitting a level 6 or level 7 in this course. Right now, I just need a little bit more evidence. Can you sit this part of a paper or write this part of an essay or something like that? So I've got a little bit more evidence that helps me support that particular prediction. So the end of year 11 grade is not the same as the predicted that we put in for university. Thanks for that question.
Excellent. Thanks, Mr. Patton. If anyone's got any more questions, you can raise your hand as well, and we'll happily, I'll open your mic if you raise your hand or if you put it in the Q&A. I'm happy to take any more questions that there might be at this point. Okay, yeah. Mr. Lozman, I think, yeah, you can, I think I've allowed your mic now, so you should be able to speak.
Yep.
Yeah, there we
Hello,
go.
good evening. And
Hi, good evening.
yes, good evening, and many thanks for the very informative overview of the different criterias and gradings. Question is that you're very well described in using the predicted grades in the diploma program. So, but why can't we use a predicted grade, or can't we as parents receive predicted grades throughout the year to see where the kids stand right now, knowing that this is not be the end of the year, and there's still a lot of time to improve, but would give us a much more sense of awareness of where the kids stand right now.
And you're talking about in grade 11 and 12, a predicted grade?
No,
for
in MYP. So in between 6 to 10.
All right. Well, I think what we hope is a better way of informing where a student is now, and what we've included in the reports is actually the criteria scores from 0 to 8 against the different criteria that they're getting and that they're building up as their portfolio of work develops. So, I think that is a fairer, more reliable, and more effective way of reporting what a student is currently achieving as they work through the MYP, because it gives a more detailed and a richer summary of what they've achieved within each subject, and that will be much more, as I showed, but just to reinforce, much more effectively summarized in the reports, so that parents can see that more easily than at the moment, which is a little bit of an exploration of in ManageBack, isn't it? We've got another question now, which I'll take now. I'll just turn on the mic as well for that. Michaela Supa, is that correct? Hello.
Oh,
I think Michaela.
now it works. Yeah. Can you hear me? Yeah. Hi, everybody.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, Michelle. Sorry. Yeah. Sorry.
Michaela. That's correct. That's correct.
Michaela. Okay. Perfect.
Yeah, you're right. I'm
Excellent.
father of a MYP grade 9 student. I just have a question.
Excellent.
Because I heard about introduction of the exams to grade 10, so at the end of the MYP. Is that means that you're going to issue then international MYP certificate then starting next year or something like that? Because I know it's not available right now.
Yeah, that's a great question, and the answer is no. These are internal exams that are modeling IB diploma exams. So we are currently not part of the MYP assessment process.
Right.
And we've made a kind of strategic decision really to not do that, because ultimately we hope to be able to maintain the essence of the MYP, which is an inquiry-based process or curriculum or experience, rather than going down the e-assessment route, which then kind of channels us into needing to kind of fulfill a lot of the requirements associated with that. But believe me, it has been, and no doubt will continue to be an important conversation, because I don't think that we'll ever say we're never going to do that as such. But at the moment, that's not where we are as a school. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it's a pity, because of course the assessments are very important, and they actually give a special pass and identification officially from IB, and then not having that available, internationally is a little bit of a limitation, but not a big deal. But of course, it would have been great add just to complete that. But yeah, thank you very much anyways.
Yeah, absolutely. And I recognize that. And that's one of the things, one of the reasons why people go down that road. And I guess for us, it's trying to weigh up the pros, which that could be identified as one, against the downsides of that, for sure. But yeah, it's an important conversation, isn't it? Thank you for asking that question.
Very clear. Thank you very much.
All right. Perfect. I don't think there's any other questions or hands up at this point. I'll just check the Q&A just in case I missed something. So I guess it's been quite a long presentation. So I'll just say thank you to everybody for coming. Thanks to Mr. Patton and Mr. Lurondi for their contributions as well. And remind everybody, the session's been recorded. We'll be sending it round as soon as we've kind of processed it. We'll be attaching the assessment and reporting policy as well, so parents can reference that. It's also on the parent portal, so you can reference that. So when you have that kind of whole, hey, is it predicted? Is it this grade or that? That can be, looked up quite quickly. I do think we might have got another question, so I will, yeah, we can stop recording. Yeah. Hello, does that another